I was just re-elected as the Member of Parliament for Calgary Centre. So in obviously parliamentary democracy, every constituency across Canada elects a Member of Parliament. And that Member of Parliament represents the interests of his constituents in the House of Commons. So I speak for the 127,000 people that elected me amongst all the other people that ran for this position to carry forth their interests in Canada. I also have to make sure that all the people that have need of the federal programs and want to access those federal programs and can't do it right through the government or are having trouble getting through it, that they come to my office and my staff and I make sure that their interests are looked after. I'm also the vice chair of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Natural Resources. And that's something my party has positioned me as. I'm the Shadow Minister for Natural Resources and the Shadow Minister for Canadian Northern Affairs. That's based upon my expertise in previous energy issues and other resource issues, including mining. And as a result, I sit as the vice chair of the committee, and we ascertain which studies to undertake in Parliament for the benefit of Canadians. And we also make sure that we actually are moving forward those issues so that anything the government might be missing in their interpretation of what the industry needs, that we present the alternatives to them that we think will be better. So it's all about working with the government as Her Majesty's loyal opposition in trying to get better outcomes for Canada. It's interesting you bring that up because in this last election, our voter turnout was around 60%. And 2 years ago, it was north of 65%. I would say that young people are still voting, still reluctant to vote the same way they've always been reluctant to vote. Society is becoming more and more complex. And when you approach young people and say, this is why you need to vote one way or another, you've got to make sure that it's with an eye towards what's beneficial to all of society. Because the thing about young people is they don't stay young people forever. They eventually get into society, and the jobs of politicians is to make sure we're working for the benefit of all society, so that anything we do as far as a benefit to any particular demographic in society, we have to make sure that reflects an outcome that's actually for the benefit of all society. I know that people start to vote more once they're a little older, around 25, and I think that's often because that's when they become taxpayers. So you do find people that are actually paying government are actually voting more. So it is something we try and make sure that people understand what government is about. Government is about collecting, society's goods and making sure that it's distributed proportionally, making sure that we're addressing the needs across society. But it is all about the collective good of Canadians. So that's our role. We want to make sure that people understand the information they're being given. I'm actually a little dissuaded lately by some of the divisions I see amongst the political parties, because promising the moon is one thing, but being able to deliver for the long-term good of Canadians is what we're elected for. We want to make sure at the end of the day we have a better country going forward than we had when we were first elected into Parliament. So long-term benefit, I think, is something that's difficult to explain, particularly to people that are making choices for the first time and have many choices put in front of them because there's more and more political parties. Yes, I do. The pandemic has caused a lot of lockdowns, and I've seen it most pronounced at the different ends of society. But I saw it a lot during the election because I knocked a lot of doors during this election. And you see people, it was only 2 years ago when I was elected for the first time. So I was back knocking the same doors and talking to people, and they were angrier this time. And I think they're angrier because they've been withdrawn, they've been shut into their houses, they haven't been able to go to work, they haven't been able to go to school, and these things are causing some consternation. We're a society, we're here together, and we're here to interact together. And that hasn't been happening the way people are used to having it happen. But I've seen it particularly the effects in senior citizens because I visit senior citizens facilities quite a bit. And you see that withdrawal, particularly when they're locked in their rooms for long periods of time because they can't associate. And the actual physical demise and the mental demise of our senior citizens has been atrocious during this pandemic. And it's a great shame that people are spending a couple of years of the last years of their lives without any physical or human contact at all. So that is causing, you can see that actual physical deterioration happening amongst our senior citizens. But I think it's also evident amongst students, because learning is something that's better done, believe it or not. We found this out. My mother is a teacher and a principal. Learning is better done in groups. People interact better, they learn from each other. And learning online is not providing the benefits to society that we need. So I see anger going up, I see addictions on the street going up. I see senior citizens in decline. So I do see us having a problem that we're going to have to address going forward. Science is a great subject. There was a time when Alberta had some of the best science marks in the world. Singapore and Alberta had great science outcomes. We used to have a great curriculum here, and my mother was actually part of that curriculum up at Edmonton Public School Boards. I didn't live in Edmonton, I lived outside Edmonton. But we got some great outcomes in this province from science education, science and math. And that changed because we recognized, and I know when I moved out east, that my science and math skills were better than many of my peers. But my social skills, as far as civics, international affairs, were not as well-rounded as my peers in Eastern Canada. So there's only a given amount of time you have to educate people. You've got to choose what subjects you're concentrating on. And I think in Alberta, we've got, as you can see, in Alberta, very much a society that's built upon engineers and scientists. So we've got a lot of science here in this society, a lot of engineers. Science is one of those things, and I love it in politics. So I didn't pursue science as a vocation, but I am very good at math because I spent 25 years in the finance industry. So you've got to be pretty good at math in this field. And, you know, I did a lot of advanced math courses as well. And I can tell when things don't add up. But what really annoys me in politics is when somebody says, just follow the science. And it's somebody that doesn't know anything about science that's saying it. They're just reiterating what they've heard on some media clip, which may or may not be correct. So that's a challenge we have, is for people that actually do understand science to make sure they're looking at all the science. There's certain, scientific truisms that everything is about a null hypothesis, and you move forward and basically disprove the null hypothesis in order to kind of come at what is a subject matter truth going forward, where we ascertain what facts are. And let's recall historically, some of the greatest scientists of history, Copernicus, Galileo, they challenged existing thoughts. So they didn't just accept the thoughts that were there, they challenged them. Some of them went to jail, some of them were executed for their beliefs, but eventually you found out that yes,
they were right.
The moon does revolve around the earth does revolve around the sun, the solar system is here. So these are types of things that were challenged at the time, because we used to have a very human-centric way of looking at the solar system. We don't anymore because of people that challenged existing thought. So it's all that nature about how science evolves that I think is something we have to make sure we're moving forward with. The mediaization of science is something altogether different, because you get the different truths. You've seen the misinformation, I've seen the misinformation, and for people that aren't studied in each of these fields, like with the pandemic, we're not virologists. None of us are. And we've got, there are obviously virologists in society, but I'm not a virologist, and nobody I really know is a virologist. So we've got to seek out those experts for how virology is affecting our societal outcomes right now. I really think it's our job as politicians to take all that information that all the experts bring together and make the best decisions for society about how it's going to affect society going forward. That's our role, because we've all got silos of experts, and as government, as public officials, we need to bring together those experts and come up with a solution that works for everybody. That's my opinion. There's a lot of fake news out there. It's determining what is the fake news, and people used to have a good filter because they didn't have so many news choices coming at them, news media. Now there's a different target of distribution of media, whether it's through Instagram, or whether it's through Facebook, or whether it's through television, or whether it's through magazines and newspapers, traditional media, and they're all they're all getting different customers, if you will, different eyeballs, and how they're driving those eyeballs has to end up somewhere where we're all moving in the same direction. So they'll have to eventually arrive at the point where, okay, here is the accepted truth across what we're looking at as far as the facts go. And sometimes I think this whole mediaization of experts, and people get to choose the expert or claim they're an expert on something they're not. And they'll get a media platform and suddenly they'll be able to say something and identify themselves as an expert when in fact they're not. I think we need accountability there. I think if somebody claims to be an expert in a certain field and causes some damage to society, then there should be some accountability for that, because these effects are affecting society tremendously. You look at how much more divided we're becoming. In the finance industry, you look at the way people invest, and we have this concept called confirmation bias. And the algorithms involved in the internet are really, really stressing what we call confirmation bias. So the minute you have a tiny opinion about something, you'll be forwarded all kinds of more information. So it confirms what you think, not what you know, what you think. And it'll solidify you into one camp. And as a result, people get different sets of information that they're confirming a bias on. And we're losing that middle ground where people get to talk about what are really the problems of society and how we solve them together. So these are causing divisions. And I think we need to make sure that these instruments and the way we handle these instruments and this flow of information is much more transparently available for people.
So you think we should maybe reprimand the people who actually say they're experts and are actually not, or maybe
Yes.
have.
When you say reprimand, what I'm asking for is accountability. And if that accountability has done significant harm to people, then there is a reprimand to be had, whether it's a legal penalty. But I think a lot of what drives society right now is money. And it's unfortunate because a lot has been lost in the pursuit of money. And I think a lot of the people that get on the media channels are looking for becoming an expert and actually gaining eyeballs and therefore gaining traction as far as money-making opportunities go. And so where there's great return, there's great risk, if you will. And we have to make sure that risk isn't being borne by society for somebody else's economic profit. It's a very good question, and particularly good right now because the pandemic has really divided society amongst economic levels more than anything else we've seen. The government's programs have really funneled a whole bunch of money into the pockets of large corporations and rich people. So if you had assets before the pandemic and the distribution of all the programming, you're much richer now than you were before. In finance, we call it the Gini coefficient, and it's that difference between the lowest end of society and the highest end of society, and how the ability to move between those different layers of society. A low Gini coefficient score is good. A high one means you're much more separated. And it is something we need to make sure stays low, because we don't want to have people that are born in a certain level of society that don't see themselves represented in the other levels of society. That ability to continue to earn more, get better, get a better education, and see yourselves as one of the decision makers in society is part of what makes our democratic system so enviable around the world. So we have to make sure that that continues to be available to Canadians, or else we'll have a bad outcome one way or another. We've given a lot of money in this pandemic to corporations. The amount of corporate welfare that we've doled out is astronomical, more than we've ever given out in history. And that's something, when large corporations are being given a lot of money through government programs, taxpayer money, next generation taxpayer money, because we've gone significantly into debt as a result of this, then we have a problem, because we have a whole level of society that has not been funded well and will bear the burden of these programs when they become taxpayers.